first of all, we want to figure out like, what does loneliness actually mean, right? And very often we hear loneliness as being the feeling of being isolated, right? So I want to hear your comments. Like, what is it for you? What does loneliness feel like to you, right? It's the feeling of being isolated. And in other words, another way we can start to think about the feeling of being isolated is, I know it's just a play on words, but think about this for a second. Being isolated with a feeling. So I'll repeat that again. Loneliness, the way I understand it, is the feeling of feeling alone, feeling, like as entrepreneurs, we're doing our thing, we're implementing, we're strategizing, we're personal growth, we're reading all the books, we're doing all the webinars, we're doing the workshops, we're getting coaching, and it's like this internal emotional roller coaster, and we have this big dream, and not everyone necessarily sees that big dream. So sometimes it feels like on your way to wherever you're going, on the way to that journey along that mountain, you feel isolated, you feel alone, you look around, you're like, oh, these people are just doing the 9 to 5, and then, or whatever, they're doing something else, and you feel like separated from that, and you feel alone, right? And so what I want to offer you is feeling being isolated with a feeling, right? So instead of feeling isolated, being isolated with a feeling. And that's what I want to teach you guys today. How can we, be isolated with our feelings? And actually, it's really what meditation teaches us. And if you're not into meditation, you're like, you don't like that word. Meditation is simply the ability to observe, and not just observe on an intellectual level, because I don't want to give you guys just the raw motivation. Okay, if you're lonely, then, go do this and think positive. All of that is great. And I'm going to talk about state meditation. All of that is great, but it will always keep you on this roller coaster, right? Where it's like, I feel like shit, and I'm going to do this thing, and now I feel great, and then I feel like shit, and it's like this constant roller coaster. And you feel like you never really get off. And then what happens when you stay too long on that motivated, oh my God, more information, more coaching, more, just be positive, let go, all that, that intellectual jargon of motivational speaking that happens is great. And you intellectually start to understand it, and it points you in the right direction. But eventually what's going to happen is you're not going to get off that roller coaster, and you're going to feel incompetent. You're going to start to feel, and let me know if this is true. The only reason why I'm sharing this with you guys is because I've observed, and that's what meditation is, being a meditation practitioner for the last 25 years, I think. You start to learn how to observe your experience, not from only an intellectual level, but from an experiential level, right? From a nervous system level, from the mental patternings of your mind level, from an energetic level. Because when you stop, because that's what meditation is stop and just isolate yourself with a feeling, right? You start to allow yourself to go into that depth, into the dark cave, into the dark night of the soul. But the problem with that is if you only go into the dark night of the soul, and what happens is, you can drown there, and you don't necessarily know how to utilize, right, this darkness, because we all have it, right, this dark part of us, or whatever you want to call it, part of us, we don't necessarily know how to utilize it and take that passion, take that it's a literal energy, right? And utilize it for our business, utilize it for our clients. Because basically, when you can do this, when you can take, your dark night of the soul, when you can take your processes, when you can really show your clients, right, how you have developed transformation, not from like, okay, you're lonely, so go out and make a friend. Like, when you can actually show them that you've been in that dark night, you've been in that loneliness, you've been in that place where you feel isolated, you've been in that place where you don't want to get out of bed, you've been in that place where you're waking up like panicking about your business. You've been to those places, okay? Raise your hand, let me know if that's you, because if you're aligned with your soul, inevitably, and you haven't necessarily learned the techniques of aligning your body, in a way that calms the nervous system, aligning your mind so that your old mental subconscious patterns don't keep on kind of coming in the way, and aligning your energy, right? Then all of this stuff is going to feel very overwhelming, because as human beings, let's face it, we all face that isolation. We all face those overwhelming feelings. And so as an entrepreneur, if we don't necessarily know how to navigate through those things and begin that process, it's going to be very difficult to have longevity, because all of that is draining on your energy. And it's like this push-pull between, like, okay, I got to do my stuff today, I got to hustle, I got to do my thing, right? And it's constantly pulling on your physical, mental, and energetic body, right? So it's something that we want to start to master and start to utilize. Well, how can we actually utilize this? So all of a sudden it starts to pay me back, and it starts to pay my clients back, because guess what? If I am able to move through that and hold myself in that space, then guess what? I can do it. If you're a coach, then you can do it with other people, and you can do it from that way where it's like, you're not just telling them, and you're not just intellectualizing, and you're not just saying, well, maybe you should, go and say, these motivational, inspirational thoughts every day, or you do these mantras, or do this om, like, all of that are like these little piecemeal kind of state changes. And that's what I want to say is, like, at first we learn that, especially in the personal growth field, we learn how to change our state, right? Let me know if this makes sense. So it's like, if, for example, you're feeling a certain way, and especially if you're really at this kind of low of the low, some people they almost need the flip side. They need to, like, okay, if I'm like sitting on my couch and feeling like crap, I need to jump and get out and go, and get wind and be in a different environment, talk to different people. We at first need that state change just to kind of get out of the freaking, like, the mud, right? But again, if we're only doing that, it's gonna feel like this. We're gonna be like, I'm good, and then, I'm good, and then that could feel very tiring and very draining. Ask me how I know, right? I've gone through that journey. But the beauty now, if you have practiced the ability, and this is what I teach our clients, and if you were to work with me, the ability to start to see yourself from a physical level. Because the very, very first things we do in our program is we start to learn how to get grounded in the body. So this concept I teach, where it's a feeling versus think. Because you can think all, like all the positivity in the world if you feel like crap and all this, and like, I'm amazing, like all of that, okay? And it will help you for a while. But because life is always trying to show you, what it is that is going to help you expand, it's going to show up in these sort of chronic emotions, right? And at first, what we tend to do with those emotions, right, when we're feeling isolated with feelings, is we're going to want to distract ourselves. And and we're gonna kind of want to change that state of being. But eventually, once you sort of refine that first stage, and I'm not knocking that first stage, I think it's very useful to be able to change your state of being in a moment, because we all know, like, sometimes we just need to freaking make our kids lunch and respond to that email and do the thing and go to the pharmacy, like, so we kind of need to do something to snap out of it, right? But eventually, and you guys know this, so let me know. I'm not seeing the comments. Let me know if you've gone into those places and you feel isolated, you feel overwhelmed, and you sometimes start to go into this despair and hopelessness and this whole kind of spiral, like, oh my God, I'm this coach and I'm do this transformation, and like, what the hell? I'm like all fucking messed up, right? So eventually we're gonna have to learn how to ground ourselves in the body, because that's where emotions and feelings live. They live in your physical body, and it manifests in the mind as a meaning. We place meaning to what's happening in the body, to what's happening with these feelings. There's a meaning. And then energetically, we develop a certain pattern, right? Often at the very beginning, when we're not conscious of that pattern, it's just this reoccurring pattern, right? Right? This reoccurring pattern. Claudia says, I feel like I need a vacation now. And that, Claudia, is a symptom of that, like, you know, that sort of state change and then coming down, state change and coming down. And then what happens is you get exhausted, right? And I'm not saying you don't deserve a vacation. Everyone needs a vacation to resource themselves and rejuvenate themselves. But if it's from that place of like, I've been going like this and like, fuck, like X, count me out, tap me out, I'm done, that kind of thing, then that is a symptom of you kind of being in that pattern of like, and yoga does this, okay? I'm a yoga practitioner, and yoga will do this. It'll get you on that high, and you're like, and you feel blissful and you're great, and after that you're like, oh my God, that was the most amazing, enlightening experience of my life. And then 2 minutes later, why the fuck do I feel like shit again, right? So here it is. This is what I want to start to teach you guys, okay? And this is what I've learned by observing my own mind, observing meditation, is first, okay, and this is what, if you were to work with me, I start to take you through this, right? The first thing we need to understand is that we all have patterns, right? We have patterns physically, right? So, you know, when we're nervous, we kind of do something, we have physical manifestations of our patterns, right? We have our mental patterns, meaning to say, like, if whatever, let's say you're scared of dogs, right? And not everyone is scared of dogs, so you know this, but you're scared of dogs. A dog is coming, you're like, oh shit, oh my God, the dog, I better move, oh my God, right? That's your mental pattern, right? That's not necessarily factual, but because you maybe had a traumatizing experience in your past, your physical body's first gonna feel it. It's gonna feel that anxiousness, that need to fight, flight, or freeze. And then it's gonna feel like, oh fuck, right? And then it's gonna have this energetic kind of grip in your body, right? And those are all unconscious, not your fault, but they're all unconscious imprints that happen to us as we, especially when we're younger, we take in everything. So it has these imprinted patterns. And so if we don't learn first how to feel those patterns, so that's step number one, the ability to simply feel versus think it. Because that's where the motivation, inspirational talk, and intellectualization doesn't necessarily work at a certain point, because your body's always going to re-experience these old wounds, these old patterns, these old traumas every time a simulation from the outside occurs. Does this make sense to you guys? You know, is there something here like that you're resonating with, maybe even in this week, right? And that's the funny thing, that's what I've been doing. Katie has been away, so I've been kind of like flying solo, right? And really, you know, practicing, okay, I'm going to be teaching about loneliness, so spend some time alone, Jamie, because you're going to have to move through that process and really observe, right? And so one of the things I teach our clients is, number one, we have those patterns, right? And it's not enough just to know those patterns. And number two, what we tend to do, right, is we tend to judge those patterns. Okay, so once we notice, oh my God, like, you know, I have these imposter syndromes, I feel, you know, angry, I feel frustrated. I was just on coaching call with my coaches, and I had this pattern of sadness, but underneath that sadness, guess what they saw that I didn't see? They saw anger, resentment. And it was like, it's so unconscious, right? So, you know, if you were to work with me, we don't heal alone. Human beings don't heal alone. So we need another mirror sometimes to allow ourselves to be the mirror of our patterns. And what I'll continue. basically what happens when we start to see the patterns, automatically what we're going to do is analyze it and judge it, right? And usually judge it in the negative connotation, because we as human beings have a negative bias. So what's going to happen is that you spend too much time there, and then that's when you start to get the imposter syndrome. That's when you start to get the doubt. That's where you start to feel like you want to give up, because you're in this constant state of in the pattern and judging the pattern, in the pattern and judging the pattern, and almost trying to fix it from that intellectual level, and it will never be resolved. It will never be at that place where you can come into acceptance and come into release from that place. And this is where I see a lot of coaches make the mistake. They go right away to the solution of, you just need to accept it. You need to let it go. Well, what does that mean? What is the process of actually letting go? Because intellectually, yeah, sure, of course, yeah, letting it go, yeah, I get it, right? But what is the actual process of moving you from that place where you're in the darkness, and then moving yourself into that place where you are actually in acceptance, actually into loneliness? So this is step number 2. So Claudia says, one cannot master without a teacher, right? And number 1, your first teacher is yourself. So like the reason why I spent all this time alone, which I spent a lot of time alone, this week was like, okay, I'm going to be teaching this. So let me process it so that I can come to the table with an actual experience versus an actual intellectual experience. And that when your clients feel you teaching from that place, they will intellectually, both your intellects will be part of it, and it will be great, and it will be this, but by the end of it, you're both going to be like, okay, now I'm actually experiencing it. What do I do with that experience? And so see the pattern, then you observe then you judge a pattern, and then step number 3, you start to observe the pattern. Again, not only from this intellectual place, but from this physical place in the body. And that's the very, very first thing I would do with you if you were to work with me, is see how your physical manifestation happens. And then see how it manifests on a mental level, and then on an energetic level, right? So we call that the 3-level clearing process. And then we would clear it. And so observation of the pattern is not just this simple intellectual, and if that's all it took, if it only took this intellectual observation, we'd all be enlightened Buddhas, because how many books tell us, do this, do that, see this, do that. It would be like that. So what we have to understand when I teach you guys these stages is that we have to see where we are in that process. We don't have to be fixed. We don't have to figure it out. We have to see where we are in that process. So observation, and you're going to continue to go into the observation of your body, continue to go into the observation of your mind, continue to go into the observation of your energy. And then from there, this is where you start to befriend that place. And again, I'm saying the title, and just because I say the title, it's not, okay, I just befriended. No. Because first of all, what happens, and this is what I tell people, it's like, first of all, the pattern's just like this, and you can't see through it, and you're just seeing through it, and just like I've been seeing through sadness. And then behind that, what? On a deeper level, there's anger. What? On a deeper level, there's resentment. What? There's a deeper level of unconscious messaging. That's the story, that I'm a burden. I did not even know that on a conscious level. So no intellect could, and no rah-rah, no information could actually go to that place, right? So first is the pattern, and you don't even freaking know the unconscious patterns, right? And then, right, this is what this journey is, becoming conscious beings. Then you start to see, and you're like, oh my God, and then you judge it, and you're like, oh, bad, blah, and you resist it, and you're like, and every time it comes, you're like, and then that's kind of sometimes a state change, where it's like, let me distract myself. I hope this toilet paper is right, right? And then it comes so much into your vortex, into your awareness. At a certain point, you're gonna have to deal with it, and like, okay, now that I know that this is an unconscious, this is something chronic, now that I know, right, can I start to observe, like, okay, and you start to look at it, right? And at first, you know, you look at it and you're like, okay, yeah, that's enough, I'm done. That's what meditation is, right? You're like, first you're in the pattern, you're like, oh my God, I have to do all this stuff. And then after that, you're a judge, you're like, oh, I'm such a bad meditator. And then you're like, you start to ground in the body, calm the nervous system. And then you can actually start to like, look, and in doses. That's why meditation is a regular practice, because again, it doesn't just happen in the intellect transformation, right? So we practice this observation. And when we can do that, when we can really come with this place of curious, like, this curiosity versus this resistance versus, go away, versus, I'm gonna state change. Like, we've all done that, right? Right? And it's sometimes it's necessary, because we need to kind of like process it enough so that we can get to a place where our nervous system, our body is calm enough to look at it. And that's what we do in week 2 in our program. We learn how to process emotion, because they continually come in, and if we don't have a way of processing it through movement and breath, then it's very difficult to get to that place of observation, right? And this observation place, I would say, is where the loneliness can sometimes be, because you're just in this observation of it, and you're just like isolated with that feeling, right? And then here is where the key is, okay? You're in that observation, you're in that observation, you're in that observation. And then how are you holding your experience in your physical body, in your mind, and in your energetic field? And how are you being conscious of other people's psyche, other people's energy in that field that is actually not yours? Because we didn't come into this world thinking, you know, I didn't come into this world thinking I was a burden, right? But there's this unconscious, and my mom, I'm sure, did not intentionally, unconsciously transfer that message to me, right? It's a lineage, right? This is where it sort of gets a little bit like, this is a lineage of what we are, our lineage is bringing forth to us, so that we can start to see it as actually this place of growth. So as we start to approach it, that observation from this very curious place, from eventually what happens when you're like, okay, all right, loneliness, frustration, okay, you think you have no friends, you think you're alone with it, okay, sit right here, okay? Have a place, as my coach would say, have a place, or even actually, this is what the Buddhists say, it's like, let those fears have a seat at the table, right? Let me just read what Claudia's saying. I had a very challenging conversation with a parent, realizing now why I am, right? Yeah, right? So are you talking about having something related to what we're talking about? Maybe elaborate a little bit there, Claudia. Feeling tired. Oh, I am tired. Yeah, right? Because what's happening is you're trying to change your state, but your state is also trying to show you the underneath, right? The underneath of what's happening. And then what happens when you can go into that place where you're starting to come from a place of tenderness, physically, mentally, energetically. When you come from that place where you actually can work with it physically, work with it mentally, and work with it energetically, and hold it with such grace and such respect, that's where the acceptance starts to come. It's not from this resistance. It's not like, I'm going to accept it, I'm going to let it go, I'm going to kill it off, I'm going to change it, I'm going to fix myself. Because on the spiritual path, we all know we've tried that way, right? We've tried that way where it's like, you know, okay, you're just like so motivated, and especially entrepreneurs, right? We are so motivated to expand, right? Because it's our nature to expand and hustle and do the thing, because sometimes we want the business thing, and then it's almost like we kind of beat ourselves with that well, we should do it, and we're just muscle through it, right? Literally muscle through it. And what happens when you muscle through it? You contract, right? You resist, you fight, fight or freeze, and it's very tiring, right? That's very tiring, right? Until in yoga we have this thing called surrender. So again, this is what kind of drives me nuts when people are like, oh, we just need to surrender and let go. What do you mean? Just no. It's like, there is a little bit more nuance to just let go and just surrender, right? Surrendering is a process of continuing to go into the observation and continuing to see when you're fighting or flighting or resisting, continuing to see like, oh my God, I was like literally unconsciously seeing this pattern. Like that will, like throughout my continuous journey until the day I die is going, what I'm explaining to you guys, the pattern, judging the pattern, observing the pattern, and coming into friendliness and acceptance is a cycle, it's a circle. But now, right now, if you understand the journey of the soul, like journey of going into the dark cave, now you can be like, oh, okay, here I am. I'm in that place where I like literally was not seeing that anger. I like literally, this happened like last week with my coaches. I'm like, what? Anger? Huh? Like, I thought I was just really sad and I was in grief, but there's anger underneath. Like, and it's like, it really, my coach, she's also an energy kind of worker, and she just saw that. And then she saw it coming from, this old patterning, this unconscious patterning I had with my mom, who gave me the unconscious patterning of being a burden. So it's like all of this, right, is unfolding and unprocessing. And if I'm just going to be in this place where okay, great, now it came from my mom, now, and then I can go into resistance, I can go into blame, I can go into resentment, and then I can also start to feel incompetent, and I can start to feel tired, and I can start to go down this rabbit hole where I'm not actually being fueled with being isolated with the feeling. That's the definition that I have given for loneliness. Usually it's the feeling of isolation. But what if we isolated ourselves with whatever feeling comes up, right? And then as we do that, as we start to get past the patterning, get past, the judgment, and go into that place where we can observe. And it's not from an intellectual place. That's why in our program we constantly move into the body, right? And that's why I tell all of the yogis, all of the coaches who have this background, and Katie and Claudia, you know this, because then you guys already have the assets. And so once you have those assets and you actually start to observe, right? And that's what meditation is. It's turning the eye inside. Observe yourself and synergize your own processes and tools. You have what people pay you for. You have what you pay yourself with, right? What are we on this journey for, right? Most of us who are on the spiritual path is to awaken to who we are on all of these different levels. So when we can actually start to articulate it and dissect it, we're not going to continue to go in that pattern, because sometimes we have the assets, but we don't. It's like what my coach is saying, like you have the keys to the magic potions or the drugstore, but you don't use them, right? And so when you start to allow yourself to observe, and you allow yourself to slowly see yourself in resistance and in tenderness, in resistance and in tenderness, because it's going to be like that. It's not just going to be like, oh, just be so loving and so kind. Like, no, it doesn't happen that way, right? Then slowly what you start to do is you start to be able to hold that experience as it is. So there's, and it's another thing I learned with my coaches. everyone has a back and forth. Everyone has a back and forth, right? And I was like getting confused because I'm like, oh my God, I'm supposed to be here and then there. And like I teach this stuff and I'm still like, sometimes it confuses me. And I'm like going back and forth, thinking like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. I'm going back and forth. Why am I constantly in this? And then I'm in that, and then I'm in this, I'm in sadness, and then I'm fine, and then I'm sadness, and then I'm fine, right? And then that's very tiring. But what if I actually held that with such tenderness and such grace and tenderness is not if you feel it on a physical level, it's much easier to implement because you're not trying to intellectualize it, trying to be gentle, right? You're actually physically being tender in your body, and you yoga teachers know this, and this is where you can start to utilize your teaching, is to be able to hold everybody else in tenderness, right? So we must start to learn how to truly hold it in ourselves, because when we can do that, when we can hold it in ourselves, because we are our first teacher. Claudia says, yeah, we need teachers. We are our first teacher. But then again, because I have so much awareness, I have other teachers who can also see that unconscious thing that I honestly, I was like, what? Anger? And so I started to also look a little deeper and start to allow myself to be with the anger, right? In that tenderness, not make it go away, not try to be so positive all the time. Like I am that person, but I am also, wait a minute, underneath that, there's some anger. So if I can hold that place with tenderness, right, then I can hold my experience, and Claudia, this is for you, and then you can hold other experiences. So if you can hold steady in your experience, and one of the things I also teach you guys is to discern between your energy and somebody else's energy. Okay, so Claudia, we might want to work on that, right? Then you can hold and be centered and on an energetic level when you start to learn how to feel. And this is where it starts in the body, but when you start to learn how to feel, it gets more subtle. Learn how to feel your actual essence, your actual energy signature, because we all have one. Just like we have an sort of an energy signature of our body, like we all have, when I look at Katie or when I look at Claudia, you all have an energy. You have a physical kind of signature, right? If I saw you walking on the street, I'll be like, oh my God, I know that's Katie. I know that's Claudia. Same thing with your energy field. It feels a certain way, right? So when you're in communion with somebody, right, you can feel them, and that's beautiful. But when you don't know how to discern between the two, then it becomes, like Claudia was saying, it becomes this tiring thing. And then because you're dealing with your own stuff and you're dealing it maybe from here, it's like all of it becomes very draining. But when you come from this place where you start to allow yourself and you start to really practice, that practice in yoga and in all spiritual traditions, that practice of surrender, right? Like, can I give myself permission to be with that anger? Then all of a sudden then you start to come to that place of acceptance. And acceptance doesn't mean it's gone, doesn't mean it's fixed, doesn't mean you're never going to feel anger again. Acceptance means being able to experience your experience as you experience it. Being able to isolate yourself in a feeling. And sometimes the connotation of isolation feels like, who wants to do that? But imagine being able to be in a room all on your own with your anger, with your resentment, with whatever feelings of feeling a burden, with that draining energy. And now taking it and learning how to utilize, literally, and this is what I teach our clients, is literally taking that energy and bringing it, because energy it never goes away. It simply is something that you can transform. So if you're aware of how your energy is sort of being depleted, right, and that the symptom of that is feeling tired, then you can take that energy consciously and put it back into your energetic center and give other people back their power, their energy. So if you're a coach, you're not there to fix them. You're not there to heal them. You're just there to show them and be a mirror of their truth and give them tools of how to be with that truth. And to me, that's true acceptance. When you can be in the truth of like, yeah, man, I got like some anger, I got some resentment, I got this unconscious like thing that I'm a burden when I start talking about my own problems, right? It's like, and so intellectually, yeah, you know, I teach this stuff all the time, but on those kind of very subtle levels, I could not see that. I didn't see that. And so having somebody hold that space for me, because you know this as coaches, you're constantly holding space for other people. Having people support you in a real life human way, right? Because they've done the work. They've gone through that place where they've held themselves, first of all, in that like pattern place, and then that place of judging themselves, and then that place of observation, like, oh, how curious, oh my God, you do this, and then you do that, and then, right? And then from that place of, okay, sit right here, have a place at the table. What is it you need, love? Right? And what everyone needs in that place when they're feeling isolated from the world is the ability to just be held. Not to be fixed, not to be motivationed away, not to, it's like when you're, and that's the strength that we need to build as coaches, is our ability to stand centered in where we are at, to meet your clients where they are at, to be able to listen to them and to be able to show them, not tell them, the way through their own cave, their own darkness. Okay, let me know if this is making sense, right? What is your biggest takeaway so far? Let me read Claudia. I made an effort to calm the situation with an intense conversation. Also tired with the journey and decisions. I feel like a little girl who is sad and angry. That's beautiful, right? So here's the stages right there, Claudia, right? Where it's like, okay, you're kind of, you see the pattern, you're kind of judging the pattern, you want the pattern to go away, you feel like you're giving your energy to the situation, right? You're giving it without necessarily discerning between what your energy is and their energy is. And then all of this, what is it showing you? It's showing you the deeper core wounds of feeling sad and angry, and the indication, like, as a little girl, because that's often where these imprints get rooted, right? They get rooted in that place where we are so open and so available and so loving and so accepting that we just receive it, but we don't necessarily, and we receive it as truth. And Claudia says, yes, I can say that. The deep, anyway, elaborate on that. The deep, okay. And so all this to say is, when you can, first of all, understand we all have patterns, physically, mentally, energetically. When we're all going to judge it. So, even notice yourself in this, when you're coaching, right? It's like you're judging the other person, and you might have arrived somewhere, and then you're just kind of telling them, right, what they should be doing. Like, go forgive them, or go, and it's like, that is not where the person is at, right? And then, because what we need to do is we need to develop the ability to observe, right? Observe what happens, First of all, you're like, in meditation, the pattern is like, you see the pattern, and you want to get out of it right away. That's that thing I was telling you about, that state change, right? That okay, right? And that's why we itch, and that's why we think we want to get a drink, and then because we're having a hard time holding our actual experience. And then if we calm our nervous system enough, and we get grounded enough, and we use movement, we use that, then we can get to a place where we actually can observe. And that's why movement and breath is so effective, because then it bypasses the mind and it allows this space for that energy to flow through us. and gives us like, that gives our body and our nervous system this place to kind of integrate and process. And then we can go into that observation, and then we can start to be curious. It's like, right? That place of curiosity versus resistance, right? And then slowly watching ourselves coming from the push-pull, the resistance and the acceptance, the resistance and the acceptance, right? Let me know if this is true for you guys. You feel that where it's like sometimes you're in resistance and sometimes you're in acceptance. Sometimes you're in resistance and then you think, what the heck, something's wrong with me. When really, if we understand, well, that's just part of a stage, that's just part of the process. That's when we can come into that place of acceptance. Like, wow, God, every human being goes through that. Oh, right? And then you're like, okay, come, show me then. Show me, just let me see, let me watch you there, right? And let me hold you there. And let me give you what you need. So as you do that, when you're like, okay, come sit down and listen, right? Because that's what meditation is. It's just this ability to kind of listen to what's there. And eventually, what is there is it's going to show you your kind of your deeper core wounds, right? And this is a process I take my clients through. We come to a place, right, where we can start to really see and hold our deeper core wounds and see the root and see where the story came from, see where the energy pattern came from, and really just hold it and be with it and let it actually be free, shed the light on it, right? Let that be free, and then we start to liberate ourselves, and we also liberate those who may have given us the pattern unconsciously. Okay, and that's where that forgiveness comes from. Where it's like, oh, you start to see all of that in yourself, and then you're like, oh, okay, of course, that's what happened with my mom. Of course, like, you know, those unconscious patterns her mom gave her, or her dad gave her, or whatever, you know, whatever her experience is. And then that's where it slowly starts to shed that holding on that we have, right? And it's not a linear process. Like the shedding of that for me is going to be a lifetime, and maybe, you know, it will never be completely gone away or healed away or fixed away or motivationed away, right, in this lifetime, because as human beings, this is the experience. The dark cave is the experience. And this process helps you not drown in it and make you, have you in this place where you can't function, and then you start to feel incompetent and you start to doubt your own abilities. It actually gives you the tools, the gold. Say, oh, right. Because when you can truly bring yourself through that process, and then you start to observe, not try to fix, not try to motivate away, not try to coach away, you start to truly observe, right, your physical pattern, your mental pattern, your energy pattern, and somebody else's, and understand and discern between the two. Then you can hold space, right, for yourself and them, and from this place of, okay, come love, what is it, right? Because you brought yourself through that pattern. Is this making sense to you guys? I want to hear your biggest takeaways. I want you to let me know what is landing for you, and let me know, like, you know, do you see yourself in those stages, the pattern, the judgment, the, you know, the ability to, you know, that place where you're accepting and resistance, and that place where sometimes you come into this tenderness, and if maybe you've even been held in that tenderness, and how that has started to melt away and shed, right? Our deep shame around those patterns, those old patterns. So Katie says that yes, the contraction and the expansion and the awareness is still center of it all, right? We're constantly contracting and expanding. I mean, like, for me, I always say that life is the body is an encrypted code to life. Like, what the heck happens when we actually go through the birth canal? What is it? We're contracting and we're expanding. We're contracting and expanding to be born, right? Like this is why, like for me, I love that watching the body, because the body it never lies, first of all. Okay, it's only maybe our meaning and our interpretation that starts to give us, maybe like a misread and misunderstanding of the facts of who we truly are, right? And so when we look to the body, we look to the mind, then on an energetic level, the more and more you can start to sit in the center of your energetic essence. Because we all have one. You know that when you hang around people, like they have a certain vibe, right? You're like, oh yeah, when I hang out with Katie, there's a certain vibe. When I hang out with Claudia, there's a certain vibration. Literally, if you can discern what your vibration is and what that feels like, and let yourself actually, and this is what I teach our clients, this is where that expansion comes from, actually expand there. Let that light, literally, that you are, that essence of who you are, actually expand, and you hang out there and you center yourself there. That light, okay, one, as you do the clearing, your soul's voice will come in more clearly. It won't have the patterns. It will come in more clearly. And then, and you can root that down here onto the earth, but then you can also expand there. And that's where a lot of us don't necessarily realize how infinite and eternal we are. And that's why I love the body, because you can find that eternity there. You can find that infinite place there, because the body is this continuum of feeling. You can't stop feeling your body unless you numb out, unless you do those sort of coping mechanisms that eventually are going to bite you in the ass or bring you down a path that goes into addiction or codependency, right? But if you go towards, right, those feelings of sadness, those feelings of anger, those feelings of frustration, and you actually understand that your eternal body can hold those experiences and hold it with so much light and hold it with so much love, right? Then you understand that loneliness is really just teaching you who you truly are. That's what it really teaches you. It teaches you who you are at your most core fundamental. And that cannot be taught in words. That cannot be taught to a book. That has to be a transmission and an exchange of an experience. First, allowing yourself to move through that experience, right? You can't bring somebody through a dark tunnel that you haven't gone through. If you've gone through it, you're like, okay, let's go together. I know it seems scary, but we can do this, right? And as a coach, when you can bring yourself there, then you can bring others there. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I just told you guys that I just recognize that I have this resentment and anger and this feeling of being a burden, but doesn't make me inadequate to coach other people through that process. Do you see? So those of you who deal with imposter syndrome, those of you who are going into the back and forth, who are going into the push-pull, who are going into the fatigue, and all of a sudden it creates this whole story how incompetent we are. When we start to see all that, and when we can see through the clarity of that, right, what you start to see is you're able to see that enough so that you have been there and you can hold the experience for somebody else. Because you can't hold an experience for somebody else if you haven't actually held it for yourself, you see? So the loneliness is actually a gift. And I think, trauma in itself, what we call trauma is there's that hidden gem, right? Underneath all that pain, underneath all that contraction, underneath all that pressure, underneath all that numbing, is that gift of finally having permission to expand into that, what we call like that eternal self. And that cannot be learned by an experience. That cannot be learned by some book. We actually have to allow ourselves to, at each stage of what I was talking about, the pattern, the judgment, the observation, the acceptance, the friendliness, the letting go, we have to be present enough, right, in our nervous system, in our body, in our mind, clear enough. And that's another thing we teach is how to teach you the one technique that, like, most meditators, monks have, they're like doing the 100 mantras, are searching for. So I teach you that one technique. Just keep it simple, right? Deep does not have to be complex. I always say that, right? So we teach you how to ground in the body. We teach you how to process emotions, super important. We teach you how to clear the mind so that the soul's voice can be louder and louder, and start to become the leader. We start to teach you how to master that energy, because if you're listening to that, but then you're all scared and you're not allowing yourself to expand and sit in your eternal self and allow that eternal self to shine light on all of those other parts that you are maybe ashamed of, or you think there's something wrong with you that needs to be healed away, or you need to do another retreat because you haven't healed it, and all that, right? When it can be done and it's available to you right now. You are able, if you're willing, to allow that which is you, which is the true essence of you, to expand and shine light, and allow everything else to be liberated, everything else to be free, right? And I'm on that journey myself, where I'm liberating myself, liberating that aspect of me that has that anger, right? As that resentment, that feeling of burden. I'm letting her be free. Is it completely gone? Do I am I completely processed? No. But that's what acceptance is, and that's what's going to lead you to that shedding and that letting go. So when somebody else comes to you from that place, because you notice, you always find teachers who are a little bit ahead of you, right? And you're like, oh my God, how did she figure that out? How is she able to hold, me when I'm in my deep, dark place? Oh my God, how does she do that, right? So it's that place where it's coming to peace where you are in your journey, because there's nobody here on earth that has come to this full perfection, this full place of completely squeaky clean healed. But when you can take that and you can use your skill as a meditator, use your skill as a body worker, use your skill as a coach that can express what it is, and to teach the intellectual mind, but more importantly, it's also a transmission. When you know this, when you're with somebody and they're holding you in that space, it's a transmission. It's this unsaid, because we've gone in the dark cave and we're right there with you. We don't resist it. We don't try to coach it away, right? We don't try to numb out, right? We don't try to intellectualize it away. We don't start to hold back, or oh, I'm an imposter because, oh my God, it's triggering me. If you can observe, you can sometimes see yourself even as you're being triggered. And then that ability to hold all of it, all of you, right? Your dark, your anger, your story, your everything, your hurt, and give yourself permission to also expand into that eternal self. Let me know if this is resonating with you. I want to know, okay? So what we did today, let me recap. Oh God, I said I was going to do a meditation. And there's 2 minutes ahead. Okay, I'll do it. I'm supposed to end now, but I'll do a little meditation, because I said I would. I totally forgot. Okay, but let me recap. So we started to see loneliness as a feeling of being isolated, and I gave you sort of a reframe of being isolated with a feeling. Okay, that's step number 1. And then number 2, I started to teach you guys, right? Bye, Claudia. Thank you for being here. I hope this was very helpful, and we'll talk more about this in, I want to hear more about your interaction, right? Okay. Oh, Heather's here. Beautiful, Jamie. I need to hear this message today. Okay, so wonderful. Okay, so maybe we don't need to do the meditation. But maybe I'll just do it on a separate live like tomorrow. Okay, very deep stuff. Love it and resonates a ton. Okay, be specific when you tell me what resonates. I want to know, like, what's that thing that hit you? How was it in your words? I want to hear your synergy, because when you synergize it, then that's the process, guys, right? It's like, yes, can't wait to share, Claudia, thank you. Right, that's your process. That's your, Heather, then we were talking about this the other day, right, on our coaching call. It's like, everything that I say, if it's resonating with you, then the next time you give it to your clients, it's gonna come out in your way, right? And like everything I'm saying is also what's coming from our coaches, right? So it's like this synergy, right, of your own unique signature, physically, mentally, energetically. It's gonna come through you, and because we're not just doing this on our own, we have life holding us, that place of trust ultimately. Right? When we can truly trust in that process, trust where we are, right? Then it's like literally going to be a channel. And I'm sure you've experienced this, Heather, with your coaching clients. It literally comes in as a channel, right? When you give yourself, again, that permission to be in the observation, to go through the process, to intellectually verbalize it, and then go through, the intellectual verbalization is the end result of your own processing, right? So allowing my essence to come through, that's what I've been blocking. So here it is. Okay, so we understood that energetic, like we understood that mentally, but I want you to feel it, because I felt it. I don't know if you felt it. I want you to feel the literal coming through. Like it's an energetic yes. So it's like yes, and literally, tell me if you feel this, Heather. Like it literally comes through you. It literally energetically comes through you, and then all of a sudden your voice kind of matches somehow words to your experience, and however you explain it. Sometimes I have like my pillar of light, and I have expansion from my heart. That's the way I explain it, but maybe it's a different explanation or a similar explanation for you. But I first of all want you to feel that, Heather, because that allowing, that permitting of it, letting coming through, and that trust is gonna be the thing that's gonna help you when you are so when you are in that spot, in that spontaneous spot with your clients, or like here, because all of a sudden you're gonna trust yourself, you're gonna trust life, and you're gonna trust your soul. I know that sounds cheesy, but that's feeling, not thinking, that feeling versus thinking. And you just know, that's the only thing you can do. You just know it's going to resonate through you, is that thing that's going to help whatever it is you're scared that you're not going to say right into the atmosphere. I hope this is helpful. And anyway, I'm just trying to speak to, what I hope is going to be helpful for you. And one last thing I want to say is, like, that's kind of what happens always when trust. I'm the conduit. Yeah, it's like, 'cause, like, honestly, I start thinking about these lives like on Sunday, but it doesn't come through like literally until the hour right before. And I guess it's because it's a memory thing. Life knows, like, if I give it to you too early, it's going to be very hard for you to actually say it, because you're not going to remember it. So like literally I always try to think about it ahead of time, but it just doesn't come until the hour right before I go onto this live. And all of a sudden, whoop, it just comes out. Of course, I make my notes so I don't get completely lost, but that's when it comes. So that's what I know is going to come for you. I just know that, right? So anyway, if any of this is resonating with you and you would like some help with this, you would like some coaching with this, you'd like some real life support where it's, a high touch program where I move you through, and we go into the cave together, right? We go into the deep, dark place together. And we hold each other. I hold you in that place so it can bring you into that place of clarity, so that all of a sudden you start to get distilled in what it is you do, what is it is you offer. And it's always, again, when you hold it in trust, there's always a different iteration, but it kind of comes down to the same thing. And so I help you distill what your offer is, whatever it is that you are, you might have all of these different like certifications, all of these things, and you kind of put all of those things underneath your belt, but it's like, but when you can start to distill what it is you do, I am a spiritual, coach that helps you bridge the gap between your spiritual practice and your business, and helps you scale and grow with a simple model, right? So I also teach our clients that ability to scale, not just energetically, but that's the foundation to scaling financially, right? Because you start to move yourself into that eternal abundance that is always available. So it's a paradigm shift to start to charge more, charge a premium, 3K, 5K, 10K, 25K, whatever you want, really, right? It's a paradigm shift, and I help our clients move themselves through that paradigm, because most of us are taught to do the dollar per hour thing, right? Which is eventually not practical or sustainable enough to help yourself move through this, on a sustainable energetic level, but also on a financial level. So if you want help with that, DM me and let me know you want a breakthrough yoga coaching call. I send you an application, and you answer that, and I start to read to see where it is that where you're at, where just like my coaches did, where it's like, oh, there's some anger, there's some resentment, like what, right? So even though I'm doing my own coaching, I still have that ability to see, okay, where is it that you're stuck, right? And then on the call, we're going to move through that breakthrough. And then I'm going to tell you about the program that I offer. And if we feel like we're aligned, like we're soulmate clients, right, then I'm going to make you an offer. That's how it works. Okay. So if you're interested in that, DM me. Katie, my teammate, will put a link in the description below to let you know how you can get in touch with me. And you can simply, if you want right away, just DM me on, and let me know that you're interested. So I really hope this was helpful. I want to hear your questions, your takeaways, and I really appreciate your energy, because I felt you guys, and that's, that is the biggest gift you can give somebody when they feel isolated, is to be in the feelings with them without necessarily needing them to be different. So I appreciate you guys, and I will see you guys next week, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Bye guys. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you.